WandaVision. WandaVision is an American television miniseries created by Jac Schaeffer for the streaming service Disney Plus, based on Marvel Comics, featuring the characters Wanda Maximoff/Scarlet Witch and Vision. It is the first television series in the Marvel Cinematic Universe (MCU) produced by Marvel Studios, sharing continuity with the films of the franchise and taking place after the events of the film Avengers: Endgame 2019. Schaeffer served as head writer with Matt Shakman directing. Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany reprised their respective roles as Wanda Maximoff and Vision from the film series, with Debra Jo Rupp, Fred Melamed, Kathryn Hahn, Teyonah Parris, Randall Park, Dennings, and Evan Peters also starring. By September 2018, Marvel Studios was developing a number of limited series for Disney Plus centered on supporting characters from the MCU films, such as Maximoff and Vision, with Olsen and Bettany returning. Schaeffer was hired in January 2019, with the series officially announced that April, and Shakman joining in August. The series pays homage to past sitcoms, with Maximoff and Vision living in a reality that takes them through different decades of television tropes. Filming began in Atlanta, Georgia in November 2019, before production halted in March 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Production resumed in Los Angeles in September 2020 and wrapped that November. WandaVision premiered with its first 2 episodes on January 15, 2021, and ran for 9 episodes, concluding on March 5. It is the first series and beginning of Phase 4 of the MCU. The series received praise from critics for its sitcom settings and tropes, dark tonal shifts, and the performances of Olsen, Bettany, and Hahn. It was widely discussed and analyzed by fans based on various popular theories and perceived mysteries, as well as for its use of sitcom references and exploration of grief. The series received 23 Primetime Emmy Awards nominations, among other accolades. WandaVision serves as a direct set-up to the film Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness 2022, in which Olsen reprises her role as Maximoff. Premise: 3 weeks after the events of Avengers: Endgame 2019, Wanda Maximoff and Vision are living an idyllic suburban life in the town of Westview, New Jersey, trying to conceal their true natures. As their surroundings begin to move through different decades, and they encounter various television tropes, the couple suspects that things are not as they seem. Cast and characters. Elizabeth Olsen as Wanda Maximoff/Scarlet Witch, an Avenger who can harness chaos magic, engage in telepathy and telekinesis, and alter reality. Olsen said the series brings the character more in line with the comic book version, including depicting her mental illness, while introducing the Scarlet Witch moniker to the Marvel Cinematic Universe MCU. Executive producer Kevin Feige said the series explores the extent and origin of Maximoff's powers. Olsen felt her ownership of Maximoff was strengthened during development of the series, which allowed her to explore new parts of the character's personality, such as her humor and sassiness. She was thrilled that WandaVision focuses on Maximoff rather than making her a supporting character as in the films, and was sold on joining the series when Feige mentioned specific Scarlet Witch comic storylines that inspired WandaVision. Olsen was influenced by Mary Tyler Moore, Elizabeth Montgomery, and Lucille Ball for her performance. Michael Russell portrays a young Maximoff. Paul Bettany as Vision, an android and former Avenger created using the artificial intelligences Jarvis and Ultron, as well as the Mind Stone, who was killed in the film Avengers: Infinity War 2018. Bettany portrays a new version of the character created by Maximoff within her reality from the part of the Mind Stone that lives in her, who is the embodiment of her sadness, hope, and love. The writers referred to him as Soul Vision, and Bettany described him as decent and honorable. He was influenced by the performances of Dick Van Dyke and Hugh Laurie for this version. Bettany also plays the original character, referred to as White Vision or the Vision who is reassembled and reactivated by SWORD Sentient Weapon Observation and Response Division. That version has an all-white appearance, similar to when the comic book character was resurrected with an all-white body and no memories or emotions. Bettany differentiated the two versions by portraying the latter as both familiar and intimidating. Debra Jo Rupp as Sharon Davis, a Westview resident and wife of Todd who plays Mrs. Hart in the fictional WandaVision sitcom. Fred Melamed as Todd Davis, a Westview resident and husband of Sharon who plays Arthur Hart, Vision's boss, in the fictional WandaVision sitcom. Kathryn Hahn as Agatha Harkness, a witch who masquerades as Agnes Maximoff and Vision's nosy neighbor within the fictional WandaVision sitcom. Hahn described Agnes as the neighbor that won't get off their couch at the end of the night and is always in their business, and likened Agatha's relationship with Maximoff to Antonio Salieri's with Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. She explained that Agatha has been studying magic for centuries and is maddened to see it come so naturally. Agatha was conceived as a mentor figure to Maximoff, but was shifted by the writers to be more antagonistic to better serve the series' structure. Despite this, Agatha retains qualities of teaching for Maximoff. Teyonah Parris as Monica Rambeau, the daughter of Air Force pilot Maria Rambeau and a captain in SWORD who introduces herself in the fictional WandaVision sitcom as Geraldine. She has a toughness and an ability to be a woman in a male-dominated world. Head writer Jac Schaeffer's pitch for the series had a different character in Rambeau's role, but she was excited to use Rambeau instead when she became available for the series. Co-executive producer Mary Livanos added that Rambeau's inclusion was a discovery during development that became really enriched in the show, as it allowed an empathetic character like Rambeau to become a hero in her own right. The series shows what Rambeau has done since her introduction as a child, looking up to her mother's friend and colleague Carol Danvers/Captain Marvel in Captain Marvel 2019, where she was portrayed by Akira Akbar. Parris used Akbar's performance as the starting point for her own, taking Rambeau's relationships with her mother and Danvers into account. Randall Park as Jimmy Woo, an FBI agent working with SWORD who previously was the parole officer of Scott Lang/and Man. Park felt introducing Woo using close-up magic, something he was trying to perfect in Man, and the Wasp 2018 quickly showed the character's development since that film, indicating that he is getting better at multiple things and is being assigned to larger cases. Park was taught the magic trick by a magician and spent several days perfecting it for the series. Kat Dennings as Darcy Louise, an astrophysicist working with SWORD who previously interned for Jane Foster and befriended Thor. Returning to the role for the first time since Thor: The Dark World 2013, Dennings felt Louise would not have changed much as a person, but would be older and wiser after going to school to receive her doctorate in astrophysics. Additionally, Dennings felt the character has more confidence in herself now that she is viewed as the boss, which she never was in the films. Evan Peters as Ralph Boner, a Westview resident under Agatha's control, posing as Maximoff's deceased twin brother Pietro, who was portrayed by Aaron Taylor Johnson in prior MCU films. Schaeffer and Livanos were eager to bring Pietro back in the series and decided to take advantage of its notions of what's real and what's not, and performance and casting, and audience and fandom by having the character be recast within the fictional WandaVision program. The casting of Peters was a reference to his role as Peter Maximoff in 20th Century Fox's X-Men film series. Schaeffer noted that this recasting worked for the series on a meta level by playing on the sitcom tropes of recasting characters without much fuss and also of having a relative arrive in town who stirs things up with the sitcom's family. Shakman said Peter's role in the series was a way to play with the audience's expectations in a similar way to Ben Kingsley playing Trevor Slattery in Iron Man 3 2013, in which that character poses as the Mandarin. Schaeffer likened Peter's performance to a mixture of the characters Jess Katsopoulos from Full House, Nick Moore from Family Ties, and Joey Tribbiani from Friends. Recurring residents of Westview include Asif alias Abhilash Tandon, who plays Vision's co-worker Norm, David Lengel as Harold Proctor, who plays Phil Jones, Amos Glick as a pizza delivery man cast as Dennis, the mailman/delivery man, Ithamar Enriquez and Victoria Blade as residents cast as the commercial man and woman actors. Emma Cole. Josh Stamberg also recurs as SWORD acting director Tyler Hayward, along with Alan Heckner, and Selena Andrews as SWORD agents Monty and Rodriguez, and Julian Hilliard and Jet Klein as Maximoff and Vision's sons Billy and Tommy, respectively. Additional guest stars include Jolene Purdy as Isabel Matsuda, who plays Maximoff and Vision's neighbor Beverly, frequent MCU stuntman Zach Henry as Franklin, a SWORD agent who becomes a beekeeper when he enters Maximoff's reality, Randy Oglesby as a Westview resident who plays Stan Nielsen, the town's doctor. Alana Kohanchi and Danny Orr portray Maximoff's parents Irina and Oleg Maximoff, respectively, while Gabriel Gurevich plays a young version of her brother Pietro. Episodes. Production. Development. By September 2018, Marvel Studios was developing several limited series for its parent company Disney's streaming service, Disney Plus, to be centered on supporting characters from the Marvel Cinematic Universe MCU films who had not starred in their own films, such as Wanda Maximoff. Actors who portrayed the characters in the films were expected to reprise their roles for the limited series, including Elizabeth Olsen as Maximoff. The series for Disney Plus were expected to be 6 to 8 episodes each, have a hefty budget rivaling those of a major studio production, and be produced by Marvel Studios rather than Marvel Television, which produced previous MCU television series. Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige was believed to be taking a hands-on role in each limited series development, focusing on continuity of story with the films and handling the actors who would be reprising their roles from the films. Brian Chapek, a creative executive at Marvel, began initial work on a Maximoff series before co-executive producer Mary Lavanos joined the project in mid-2018 and took over the series development. By the end of October, Paul Bettany's Vision was expected to play a significant role in the series, which would focus on the relationship between Maximoff and Vision. In the following months, the titles Vision and the Scarlet Witch and the Vision and Scarlet Witch were both reported. When Feige was meeting with potential head writers for the series, some did not feel his proposed sitcom element would work. Jac Schaeffer, who was working on Black Widow 2021 at the time, heard the premise of the series and was excited by it. She had a meeting to pitch her ideas and was hired as head writer in January 2019. Schaeffer was set to write the first episode and executive produce the series. That April, Disney and Marvel officially announced the series as WandaVision, and Matt Shakman was hired to direct and serve as an executive producer in August. Feige also executive produces alongside Marvel Studios' Louis Despacito and Victoria Alonso. Rather than call the series Wanda and Vision or the Scarlet Witch and Vision, Feige was inspired to use a compound title like WandaVision after seeing the title for the film Black. Schaeffer insisted on using the title after hearing it, feeling it was perfect for the series. There was some backlash when the title was announced, as it was perceived to be the silliest title possible, but Schaeffer felt viewers would change their minds once they watched the series. Feige said the series would tell the story of Maximoff and Vision, show Maximoff's full abilities, explore who Vision is, and introduce Maximoff's comic book named Scarlet Witch to the MCU in ways that are fun, funny, and somewhat scary. He added that the series would have repercussions for the rest of the MCU Phase 4, but said viewers would not need to be familiar with the MCU to understand the series. He did think there would be a wealth of rewards for those who had already seen all the MCU films and knew the plans for Phase 4. The series was described as part sitcom, part Marvel epic by Feige, super avant-garde and weird by Bettany, an action movie mixed with sitcoms by actor Teyonah Parris, and a combination of superhero action and small-town sitcom silliness by Levanos. Shakman was uniquely equipped to direct such a series because of his experience directing series like the psychological drama Mad Men, the large-scale action series Game of Thrones, and sitcoms like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Shakman also felt more qualified to make WandaVision since he was a child actor on 1980s sitcoms such as Just the Ten of Us. The series totals approximately 6 hours of content across 9 episodes, which vary from a half-hour comedy format to 50 minutes long. During development, the budget was reported to be as much as $25 million per episode. Writing. Inception and structure. When Schaeffer began writing the series, she initially received comics material and an outline of what Marvel Studios hoped to accomplish with it so she could help shape their ideas. Feige had originally come up with the idea of having Maximoff and Vision living in a fantasy world of suburban bliss based on his love of sitcoms and how they can be used to escape from reality. Much of the series takes place within a fictional sitcom that is also called WandaVision. Feige was visually inspired by Mike Del Mundo's Norman Rockwell meets Leave It to Beaver covers for the comic book series The Vision by Tom King and Gabriel Hernandez Walton, and pitched the series to Olsen and Bettany as a combination of that comic book and the House of M storyline by Brian Michael Bendis and Olivier Coipel. Other inspiration for the series was taken from The Scarlet Witch, which is road trade paperback, the Avengers Disassembled storyline by Bendis and David Finch that preceded House of M, the Vision Quest storyline from West Coast Avengers by John Byrne, and also the comic book runs of The Vision and The Scarlet Witch by Bill Mantlo and Rick Leonardi, and by Steve Feige, Schaeffer, Shakman, and Levanos dedicated themselves to nailing down the series' irreverent tone. Schaeffer was inspired by the MCU film Thor, Ragnarok 2017, and the Marvel television X-Men series Legion, feeling that they broke the mold of what Marvel stories could be and were daring, original, and bananas. She felt that they allowed WandaVision to also be unique and different, and noted that it would be the polar opposite to her work on Black Widow, which focused on aggressive, visceral action. Schaeffer hired Gretchen Enders, Megan McDonnell, Bo Backus-Farjani, Peter Cameron, Mackenzie Doer, Chuck Hayward, Cameron Squires, and Laura Donney for the series' writers' room, a grouping of half men, half women, and several people of color, because Schaeffer believed the varying perspectives would create better stories. She said each writer had different areas of expertise that they brought to the series, and they were aided by her assistant Laura Monti and the general writer's assistant Clay Lapari. After starting as a staff writer, McDonnell was eventually promoted to story editor. Unlike Schaeffer, many of the writers had previous television experience which helped her craft each episode within the larger narrative. One of the initial challenges was figuring out how to tell the story in the long-form structure of a limited series, rather than a film. Schaeffer said the series could never have been a film because it needed to establish its sitcom reality with a true television aesthetic before that could be broken. Schaeffer found the central idea of Maximoff being responsible for the series' sitcom reality to be a simple concept, and felt it would be more compelling if it was revealed through a mystery. This is done by showing Maximoff and Vision living in the sitcom reality for the first 3 episodes before the 4th episode retells those events from a real-world perspective to provide answers for viewers. Schaeffer described this as starting the series in a grounded sitcom with Twilight's Zone fraying edges, followed by a bottle episode to explain the early events. How long the series remained in the sitcom reality before giving answers to viewers was a big concern for Schaeffer. Following the enormous info dump in the 4th episode, Schaeffer hoped the audience could experience the rest of the series as an emotional and a psychological journey, rather than a sneaky mystery the whole way. She pitched the rest of the series as mixing sitcom and real-world elements until the penultimate episode explores Maximoff's history and creation of the sitcom reality, concluding in a big finale with the spectacle of an MCU film. She compared the series to a multi-issue comic book and said it remained very close to her original. 10 episodes were originally planned, but Shakman said this was reworked to 9 episodes to improve the rhythm. The episode titles come from phrases featured in promotions or the opening credits of television series. Characters and universe. After receiving Marvel Studios' initial ideas for the series, Schaeffer helped figure out what they meant for the characters. Shakman and Schaeffer watched all the existing MCU footage of Maximoff and Vision, including footage that did not make it into the previous MCU films, such as unused dailies. While exploring this footage, Schaeffer was drawn to mundane character moments such as Maximoff and Vision cooking paprikash in Captain America: Civil War 2016, and the two enjoying their time together in Scotland in Avengers: Infinity War 2018. Schaeffer said there was a wonder and sincerity to the pair, and felt their family dynamic within a sitcom setting would result in a calm, warm feeling despite the ridiculous premise of the series. She found the pair appealing because they are both outsiders who find each other. They are both different with capital DS. WandaVision begins 3 weeks after the events of Avengers Endgame 2019 and is set in the fictional town of Westview, New Jersey, which was named as a reference to Feige's hometown of Westfield, New Jersey, but with the initials W and V. The series shows how Maximoff grew up in an Eastern European country and relied on black market American products such as television, forming a love for the DVD of American sitcoms that her father sold. Schaeffer was excited to use the series to give social commentary while telling a story about character and grief, as she found Maximoff's grief to be relatable. A grief counselor was consulted for the series, and Shakman said the entire series was about Maximoff learning to process and overcome her grief. Schaeffer was committed to depicting Maximoff as a fully realized character, including showing aspects of her that had not been seen much previously in the MCU, such as her joy and humor. A great concern for Schaeffer, Lavanos, and the writers was avoiding a portrayal of Maximoff that made her seem crazy or out of control, as some of her comic book appearances have done, and Schaeffer hoped the series would give a nuanced portrayal of a very complicated woman. Olsen believed Schaeffer was one of the first writers to work with Maximoff who understood the 360 of her inner and exterior world. By introducing the Scarlet Witch name as a title linked to chaos magic and a preordained destiny, the series was able to further define magic in the MCU beyond what was introduced in Doctor Strange 2016 without limiting Maximoff's character too much. Witchcraft, the Salem witch trials, and what Schaeffer described as our sort of Americanized version and feminized version of witches and magic were all new additions to the MCU after Doctor Strange introduced what Schaeffer felt was more of a masculine magic. The series also introduces the organization SWORD to the MCU, changing its name from the comic book's Sentient World Observation and Response Department to Sentient Weapon Observation and Response Division. This is due to the organization in the MCU dealing with sentient weapons, such as reconstructing the original Vision with the goal of turning him into a weapon. One of the SWORD agents seen in the series is a grown-up moniker Rambo, who was introduced to the MCU as an 11-year-old in Captain Marvel 2019. Olsen said Rambo's material was rewritten during filming, as Marvel Studios formed a better understanding of what they wanted to do with the character in the future. Other existing MCU characters, Darcy Lewis and Jimmy Woo, were added to the series out of the desire to have characters outside of the Hex with a science and law enforcement background, respectively. Initial drafts of the early episodes had more backstory for Lewis that was removed in favor of focusing on the SWORD base when outside of the Hex, though elements of these scenes were added into later episodes. Maximoff and Vision's sons Billy and Tommy appear as 10-year-olds in the series. Shakman said there were never plans to make the characters as old as they are in the Young Avengers comic book team, since that would deprive Maximoff of more time with them. WandaVision directly sets up Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness 2022, in which Olsen reprises her role as Maximoff. Schaeffer said Feige handled all the connections between the various MCU projects, but she and Shakman did have conversations with the creative teams of Multiverse of Madness and Spider-Man No Way Home 2021, as well as Marvel Studios' other Disney Plus series, to discuss the connections between stories and to ensure an effortless handoff from WandaVision. They originally planned for Benedict Cumberbatch. The script for Multiverse of Madness was rewritten to accommodate this change. The film's writer, Michael Waldron, worked with Schaeffer to do this. Sitcom influences. Shakman and Schaeffer said the series was a love letter to the golden age of television, though it pays tribute to sitcoms from many eras of American television. They chose to focus on family sitcoms over other types, such as workplace sitcoms, because the family aspect kept the series centered, and because Maximoff is searching for a family after losing her loved ones in the films. Schaeffer and Shakman studied past sitcoms to learn their trappings and styles, while avoiding tropes from older sitcoms that would not be acceptable in a modern series. Schaeffer, Shakman, and Feige spoke with Dick Van Dyke, the star of the eponymous 1960s sitcom, to learn about the making of that series. Other sitcoms that inspired the series include I Love Lucy, My Three Sons' Father Knows Best, The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, Bewitched, The Brady Bunch, Family Ties, Out of This World, Malcolm in the Middle, Modern Family, and The Office. Meta references are made to Full House, which starred Olsen's older sisters Mary-Kate and Ashley. Before they decided to focus on family sitcoms, an episode of the series was developed based on the Mary Tyler Moore show that would have explored Maximoff's work-life balance. Olsen said the sitcom decade being explored in each episode, and the tropes from that decade that were highlighted, were chosen to connect to where the characters were in the larger story. Each episode was meant to capture key elements of the chosen time period while showing the evolution of sitcoms over time. For example, the first episode pays homage to the Dick Van Dyke Show, which ran from the late 1950s to the early 1960s and was meant to have a general 1950s time period. The changes between decades are explained in the series by changes within the fictional WandaVision program, which Maximoff is initially doing subconsciously when something goes wrong in that reality. She later makes these changes consciously. Part of Schaeffer's initial pitch for the series was to link the decade changes to xenophobia from the couple's neighbors, as was seen in some of the characters' comic book appearances, with the neighbors becoming more aggressive each decade until they chase Maximoff and Vision out of town. The relationship with the neighbors was ultimately portrayed in a more subtle way that Schaeffer felt was creepier, with elements of psychological horror. The fictional sitcom features fake commercials that are slightly nefarious, which Feige said were part of the truths of the show beginning to leak out. He felt that new viewers would see these as strange versions of commercials from the different sitcom eras, while those well-versed in the MCU would be able to see connections in the commercials to past events. Several commentators believed the commercials were analogies for traumatic events in Maximoff's life, which Schaeffer later acknowledged. Shakman said the commercials were a way to present Maximoff's history and be a thematic addition to the series, and felt their content and inclusion was open to interpretation, while Schaeffer said they were tied to both Maximoff's subconscious and the wider MCU in an open-ended way. She added that they gave the series a structure and rhythm that was part of the fabric of the sitcom aesthetic. An early version of the commercials had more of an agenda and a function in the plot, with multiple commercials per episode also considered. When Doctor Strange was planned to appear in the series, the commercials would have been his attempts to reach Maximoff through the sitcom reality. He would have appeared in the Nexus pharmaceutical commercial in a Blink and You Miss It cameo as the pharmacist, before his full appearance in the finale. Casting. With the official announcement of the series, in April 2019 came confirmation that Olsen and Bettany would reprise their roles of Maximoff and Vision, respectively, in the series. Bettany agreed to join the project after meeting with Phage and Despacito, who pitched an exciting and bonkers idea for his character's return in the series. Olsen was originally nervous about Marvel's move to television and how it could connect with the films, but was excited when she learned of Schaeffer's involvement, as well as the comic book storylines that inspired the series. Teyonah Parris was announced as cast in the role of a grown-up moniker Rambo in July 2019. Rambo was previously portrayed as an 11-year-old by Akira Akbar in Captain Marvel, which is set in 1995. The character first appears in WandaVision as Geraldine inside the sitcom reality, and Schaeffer had been under the impression that Parris would be announced as playing Geraldine in the series in order to keep the character reveal a surprise. A month later, at Disney's biennial convention D23, Kat Dennings and Randall Park were set to reprise their respective MCU film roles as Darcy Lewis and Jimmy Woo. Dennings had appeared in the films Thor 2011 and Thor: The Dark World 2013, and was surprised and thrilled to be brought back to the MCU for WandaVision after so many years. Park joined the series following a general meeting with Marvel to discuss Woo's MCU future following his introduction in Ant-Man and the Wasp 2018. Schaeffer felt it was fun to feature Dennings and Park in the series since both were veteran sitcom actors, respectively starring in Two Broke Girls and Fresh Off the Boat. Also at D23, Kathryn Hahn was announced as cast in the role of Agnes, Maximoff and Vision's neighbor. Hahn had been fascinated by the gasp of human magic in the MCU and had a general meeting with Marvel Studios, as the studio was also interested in working with her. Shortly after, Marvel suggested Hahn for the role of Agnes to Schaeffer and Shakman, and they agreed that they should cast her in the role. Several days after the general meeting, they contacted Hahn about the series, and she said that she couldn't have dreamt a cooler part, partially due to the sitcom elements. The series' 7th episode reveals that Agnes is actually Agatha Harkness, a character in Marvel Comics. The series' official trailer revealed that Fred Melamed and Debra Jo Rupp would appear in the series, portraying Todd and Sharon Davis. They appear as Maximoff and Vision's neighbors Mr. and Mrs. Hart. Rupp previously had a long-running role in the sitcom That 70s Show and was comfortable with WandaVision's sitcom style. She was asked to join the series by Shakman, who she had worked with at the Jeff and Playhouse, where Shakman is the artistic director. Similarly, Shakman and Schaeffer offered Melamed the role without him auditioning, and he accepted. Asif Ali was revealed to be cast in the series in October 2020 as Abhilash Tandon, who plays Vision's co-worker Norm, as was Jolene Purdy cast as Isabel Matsuda, who plays Maximoff and Vision's neighbor Beverly. Design, colors, and sets. WandaVision was the first production to have its digital intermediate dye work completed at Marvel Studios' new color department, run by Evan Jacobs. Shakman and cinematographer Jess Hall began working with that group before filming to determine the look of each sitcom period that the series was trying to replicate. Shakman and Hall put together a collection of images from existing shows that influenced the framing, composition, and color of each sitcom setting, and Hall created a specific color palette of 20 to 30 colors for each episode based on those reference images, so he could control the visual integrity in color of each episode, a process that he had previously used. Hall worked with Josh Pines of Technicolor SA to create 23 different lookup tables for translating colors into the final look during the dye process, and worked with production designer Mark Worthington and costume designer Maze C. Rubio to ensure that the sets and costumes for each episode matched with his color palettes. Shakman said there was a progression of color between each episode of the series, and certain colors were carefully used, such as red, which is important to both Maximoff and Vision. Worthington made sets for Maximoff and Vision's house in each era, and intended for this to look like one house, with the same basic layout that was built in the 1950s and then renovated each decade. Changes were made to this as needed, such as adding the nursery for the third episode, with objects inside the house also updated each decade along with the style of Maximoff's red Buick. For the SWORD sets outside of the sitcom reality, Worthington used NASA as an inspiration since SWORD is a space agency, but wanted to create the MCU version of that. He said there were some similarities to previous MCU sets for SHIELD, but the two agencies serve different functions, so he wanted to differentiate them. Worthington added that the SWORD base outside Westview was built on a field that was cold and exposed to the weather, while the sound stages for the sitcom sets were warm and dry, which helped with differentiating the ideal sitcom world from the reality outside. Worthington and set decorator Kathy Orlando sourced period-appropriate household items and furniture from second-hand stores in Atlanta, Georgia. Prop designer Russell Bobbitt, who was the prop master for many MCU films, also previously worked on the film Pleasantville 1998, which Shakman said the series had a spiritual connection to along with The Truman Show 1998. Costumes. Rubio said it was rare for a singular piece of media to progress through so many different decades without its characters aging, and noted that the costumes of the various sitcoms being emulated by the series were not necessarily what was being worn at the time, so she was replicating the looks of those series rather than the decades themselves. Around 80% of the period costumes were made for the series to fit the actors, with the rest bought or rented from special costume houses and collections that knew of the fabrics used in the 1950s and 1960s and how garments were constructed then. Olsen enjoyed exploring how women were viewed in society in each decade through Maximoff's costumes. Hairstylist Karen Bartek created 22 wigs for the series to represent the different eras from the 1950s to the 1980s, which allowed these different eras to be filmed in one day. Rubio added an element of teal to each of Dennings' costumes to match the color of the actress's eyes. Maximoff gets a new superhero costume at the end of the series when she takes on the mantle of the Scarlet Witch. This costume was designed by Andy Park of Marvel Studios' visual development team, and Rubio worked with Ironhead Studios to create it. She explained that the creatives wanted the costume to be more mature and weathered than Maximoff's previous costumes, acknowledging what the character has gone through in the MCU so far. They also wanted it to be less revealing and not include a corset or tights, as Olsen had previously expressed concern over her cleavage corset costume from the films and the fact that she was the only female superhero in the MCU with such a revealing outfit. Olsen consulted on the design for the new costume. Shakman said the biggest element for discussion was the crown, which they initially thought should be smaller than it is in the comics. They ultimately decided to go big or go home. It is depicted as forming from magical energy before Maximoff uses her creation magic to turn it into a solid crown. Rubio worked with shoemaking company Jitterbug Boy to create the boots for Maximoff's costume. To hint throughout the series that Agnes is really Agatha Harkness, Rubio designed a medallion with 3 witches on it that the character wears as a brooch in each episode, except for when she is in aerobics gear and on a very special episode. Since Rubio could not find a natural way to integrate the brooch with that outfit. For Agatha's real witch costume, Rubio wanted to add to the mystery of the character by giving her a dress made from 10 layers of fabric that are each a different color and texture. Hahn worked with Rubio on the costume design and said it was intended to honor the character's appearance in the comic books, but with a modern look on top of it. Titles. The series end credits were created by Perception and start with a "Please Stand By" visual in the style of the episode's sitcom era. This is followed by close-ups of footage from the episode on a television screen, which the camera then pushes through to show the RGB pixels that form television images. The pixels are rendered as hexagons, as a reference to Maximoff's hex abilities and the informal name the hex that is given to the sitcom reality. The pixels form various elements from the series, including Maximoff and Vision's house, the baby mobile from the third episode, and the Westview Water Tower, which is reminiscent of the art style in House of M. The pixels are then disrupted by a single red pixel that represents Maximoff's world falling apart around her, before forming two wedding rings at the end of the sequence, since the series is at its core a love story. Charles Pulliamore at IO9 felt the credits were undeniably Marvel in the big screen sense, despite WandaVision otherwise attempting to embrace its streaming series format. Perception also created many of the sitcom-style opening credits for the series, with Shakman saying a lot of work went into creating these openings to be as authentic to each era as possible, since the creatives knew that they were a key part of the storytelling. Additional work from Perception included graphics for the fake commercials, based on real commercials from the different sitcom eras, titles and smoke effects for the Agatha All-Along sequence, on-screen locator cards, and two new transitions for the Marvel Studios logo into black and white, and a 4:3 aspect ratio for the first episode, and filming Filming began in early November 2019 at Pinewood Atlanta Studios in Atlanta, Georgia, with Shakman directing and Hall serving as cinematographer. The series was filmed under the working title Big Red. The actors went through sitcom boot camp before filming, watching episodes of past sitcoms to help learn the tone and style of each era, as well as the different approaches to comedy. Dialect coach Courtney Young helped the actors speak like people from each era, even noting the manners of each decade. Bettany felt the approach to the series was clever, since it had to make 6 hours of content on a budget similar to a 2.5-hour MCU film. This included filming content from different episodes at the same time, though Shakman did try to shoot chronologically to aid the actors with the progression through the sitcom eras. The first episode filmed for 2 days in black and white and in front of a live studio audience to mimic sitcom filming in the 1950s. A 4:3 aspect ratio is also used for the black and white scenes, and Shakman enjoyed experimenting with the aspect ratio based on the narrative. Scenes set outside the hex using the 2:41 cinematic ratio of many MCU films. Shakman wanted to ensure that the sitcom elements never felt like a parody and were as authentic as possible, since they were a reality that Maximoff created to escape from her grief and were real to her. Hall used Arri Alexa 4K HDR cameras for the whole series to create a coherent look for the story, and to make it easier to switch between different sitcom decades without needing to change the camera setup. Era-specific touches such as period-appropriate camera lenses, lighting, and live special effects were used to differentiate the period settings. Hall used 47 different camera lenses for the 7 time periods covered in WandaVision, many of which were modern lenses custom modified to keep characteristics of the period lenses. The custom period-appropriate lenses were used on the first 3 episodes, along with the 5th, while Hall used the ultra-panator lenses, which had been used on Infinity War and Endgame for all of the scenes outside the Hex reality. Tungsten lights were mainly used for the 1950s to the 1970s episodes, since those were the lights of the era, with LED lighting used starting in the 2000s episodes, which is when those began to be used for real sitcoms. Shakman used lenses, lighting, and sound design inspired by the Twilight Zone to change the mood for moments when something goes wrong with Maximoff's illusion, and illusion, illusion, and illusion, and illusion, and illusion, and illusion, and illusion, and illusion. Location shooting took place in the Atlanta metropolitan area throughout December 2019 and February 2020. A filming wrap party for the series occurred on March 1, ahead of a planned 4-week hiatus, but all production halted on March 14 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Filming resumed in Los Angeles in September 2020 with rigorous COVID-19 safety protocols in place to complete required backlot and outdoor filming. Olsen found it hard resuming production after being isolated during the shutdown, while Bettany disliked that the safety protocols meant the actors had to return to their trailers when not filming, which he felt removed much of the camaraderie between the cast and crew. External filming for Westview took place on Blondie Street at the Warner Bros. Ranch in Burbank, California, where past sitcoms had also been filmed. Shakman felt the Blondie Street backlot had that weird sense of fakeness that no real-life street could replicate. Filming for the Westview Town Square was originally planned for the Universal Studios lot near Blondie Street, but this could not happen due to scheduling and the pandemic, so filming for those scenes instead took place at the Golden Oak Ranch. Production on the series wrapped by mid-November, with Olsen shooting back-to-back with Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Editing. When the production shut down due to the pandemic, Marvel took around a month to figure out the logistics of remote work. Post-production then continued on existing footage, which informed Shakman of how to approach a few things differently once filming began again, though the series was not creatively altered by this. Post-production continued after filming resumed, and Shakman said working on every step of the process at once felt schizophrenic. Tim Roch, Zine Baker, and Nana Kade served as editors for the series, and each brought different experience to the project. Baker previously edited Thor, Ragnarok. Kade previously worked on the superhero series The Boys, and Roch came from a background editing comedy series with no visual effects. The editors agreed to treat the series like an MCU film since they knew Marvel Studios would not resort to standard television series money-saving tactics for a show like this, and Baker said editing the series was no different from editing Ragnarok. The editors did not have formal meetings to discuss the series' tone, but did work together on issues. Roch felt the series' tone was most interesting when the sitcom and MCU elements were mixed together, such as when Vision discovers anomalies in Westview during all-new Halloween Spooktacular. Aspect ratio shifts were created during post-production to give Shakman control over the lengths of the transitions, with some of the earlier aspect ratio changes going through many variations to find the best length and style and have a bigger impression on the audience. Transitions in later episodes are sometimes just a straight cut from one ratio to another, relying more on music and sound to show the change. Some scenes were rearranged to avoid changing between aspect ratios too many times and distracting from the story. One of the most discussed elements of editing was the laugh track, and the creatives worked with an expert to explain how laugh tracks changed throughout time, which informed the sound design. Previsualization company, The Third Floor, Inc., added temporary effects to edited sequences as a guide for visual effects vendors. These were also sent to the dye team to finalize the coloring of shots before the visual effects were completed, which Baker said was unusual and done to save time, but did not have much of an effect on the production's timeline. The editors all worked on the sitcom opening titles and fake commercials in their episodes, as well as the previously on WandaVision segments that begin each episode. The latter have some differences from the episodes they are recapping, such as slightly different dialogue, which plays into Maximoff's manipulation of reality. Later episodes were not completed when the early ones began airing, so the editors were able to see fan theories about the series while they were still working on it. This made them question some of their decisions, but there was no time for this to have any creative effect on their work. Editing for the final episode was completed 2 weeks before it aired. Visual effects. Tara DeMarco served as the visual effects supervisor for WandaVision with visual effects vendors for the series, including Digital Domain, Framestore, Industrial Light and Magic ILM, Lola VFX Monsters, Aliens, Robots, Zombies, Mars, Rise, Rodeo FX, SSVFX, The Yard VFX, and Zoic Studios. The series has 3,010 visual effects shots, more than the 2,496 in Avengers Endgame, though DeMarco noted that the series is longer than Endgame and that film had a lot of effects that were much more complex than many of those seen in WandaVision. The creatives tried to keep the number of visual effects in each episode to a minimum, until the 2000s set episodes where it made sense to allow more prevalent visual effects due to the technology available at the time. Each episode has more visual effects shots than the previous one, building up to the big Marvel finale in the last episode. For the first 3 episodes, contemporary visual effects were used to augment on-set practical effects and replicate other period-specific effects. DeMarco took inspiration from the Scarlet Witch's Road comic book for the look of Maximoff and Agatha's magic in the series. Maximoff's magic was created based on Olsen's on-set hand movements, with the visual effects team letting her create the movements that she wanted and then adding something tasteful with her hands that isn't distracting from her performance. The look of her magic initially matches the same red energy that was seen in the films but becomes a darker, richer red when she starts using chaos magic to signify that it is more powerful. This look was developed with Digital Domain, who primarily worked on the final episode and contributed 350 visual effect shots over 14 months. Framestore, who worked on 99 visual effects shots for the series, developed the look of Agatha's magic, which is a purple version of Maximoff's magic with a black, ink-like texture added to make it appear more evil. Mr. X contributed 152 visual effects shots for the scenes in the final 2 episodes featuring a coven of witches. DeMarco used Vision's introduction in Avengers: Age of Ultron 2015, which was primarily created by Lola VFX, as the definitive version of the character when approaching his visual effects for WandaVision. Close-ups of the character in Infinity War were also referenced. Bettany wore prosthetics over his ears to portray the character in the films, but these were replaced with CGI in post-production and were not actually needed. For the series, Bettany asked not to wear the prosthetics so he could hear better on set and be more comfortable. He instead wore a bald cap and face makeup to match Vision's color, with the blue color used for Vision in the black and white episodes suggested by Lola VFX supervisor Trent Klaus based on his knowledge of the makeup used for I Love Lucy. The series' second visual effects supervisor, Sarah Elm, focused on Vision's effects and came to know what parts of Bettany's face needed to be kept and replaced to match the character's look in the films while retaining Bettany's performance. Multiple vendors worked on Vision for the series, and they were allowed to use their own methodologies for the character as long as the end result was consistent. They generally used complex 3D and digital makeup techniques to create the character, with sections of Bettany's face replaced with CGI on a shot-by-shot basis. The actor's eyes, nose, and mouth were usually the only elements retained. Vision's skin needed to move to match with Bettany's performance, and sometimes specular highlights from the makeup were kept for the digital version, but it was not intended to look like actual skin with makeup on it and does not have pores or wrinkles. Digital contact lenses were applied over Bettany's eyes to create the complex digital radial graphics that Vision's eyes have, though these were not added for the first 3 episodes to give Vision a more wholesome look during those sitcom periods. The visual effects artists also had to manually fix the backgrounds around Vision's head since he has a narrower head than Bettany and has no ears. Mars SSVFX and Lola VFX were the primary vendors for Vision's face in the sitcom reality, while Digital Domain created a full digital version of the character for the final episode, which they shared with other vendors for use in earlier episodes. They also created a full model for White Vision. Rodeo FX spent 9 months developing the visual effects for the hex boundary and worked on 348 shots across most of the series episodes. DeMarco said the hex was meant to look like it was made of the cathodic lines of old tube TV, and pixelization and a lot of cool RGB chromatic aberration effects, with photography that had the language of television also referenced for the design. Rodeo tried using point cloud technology to create the effect, but this only worked well for dark backgrounds. The boundary is initially clear and difficult to see, but turns red once Maximoff emerges from the boundary on a very special episode, to reflect her anger and reinforce that it is a hard barrier. Rodeo was also responsible for the sequence where Vision attempts to leave the Hex in All New Halloween Spooktacular and begins to disintegrate, and the scene where Rambo enters the Hex and gains superpowers in breaking the fourth wall. ILM handled the creation of the Hex and Vision in Previously On, and also the effect of them disappearing in the series finale. Cantina Creative designed and animated graphics for different monitors and devices such as SWORD as holographic table. Music. In January 2020, Christopher Beck announced that he would compose the score for the series after previously scoring Ant-Man 2015 and Ant-Man and the Wasp. Beck paid homage to the sitcoms in each time period through his instrumentation, compositional style, and period-specific recording and mixing techniques. Earlier episodes feature small orchestral ensembles, with later episodes having more of a rock-pop style, and the music becoming more pervasive as the series progresses. Beck had hoped to match the spotting of each sitcom era as well, but found that this would not always work due to modern audiences expecting more music than older sitcoms would have included. Michael Paraskeves and Alex Kovacs co-composed the series' music, with Kovacs hired due to his experience with older orchestration techniques and jazz music, which Beck found helpful when writing for the series' early episodes. Beck was more comfortable once the episodes required music inspired by the 1980s and 1990s. To connect the music for the different sitcom eras, as well as the more traditional music for outside the sitcom reality, Beck composed several themes that are used in the different styles, which was possible since he knew where the series and characters were going from the beginning. Beck was most excited for the opportunity to write a definitive theme for Maximoff. Beck also wrote a love theme for Maximoff and Vision that he said would convey feelings of love, tragedy, and sadness, which he compared to the romance music he composed for the series Buffy the Vampire Slayer. In December 2020, Robert Lopez and Kristen Anderson Lopez were announced to have written theme songs for some of the series episodes. They were approached for the series in mid-August 2019 by Shakman, who was friends with Lopez at college, and they had previously worked with Beck on the music for Disney's Frozen franchise. To help sell the series to the couple, Shakman referenced the Adult Swim short Too Many Cooks, which the couple were aware of and called one of their favorite sketches. The couple were inspired by the theme songs from past sitcoms as well as the music from James Bond films, composer Burt Bacharach, and jazz pianist and composer Dave Brubeck. In order to tie their themes together, Lopez and Anderson Lopez created a four-note motif that worked in each of the theme song styles. The motif consists of an octave, followed by a tritone, which is also known as the Devil's Interval. This was their way of saying musically that the series was a big, bright-colored swing while also being really unsettling. Lopez described the motif as kind of like the WandaVision call-out, easily identifiable in some way in each song that was incorporated in different ways each time. The pair used their knowledge of sitcoms from watching them as they grew up and found the 1990s to be the most challenging era to write a theme song for due to them both being at college during that decade when they did not have a television, while the 1980s was their favorite. Anderson Lopez added that it was challenging to ensure the themes were not parodying any one show but would evoke all of the iconic songs from an entire decade and be their own thing. She also felt it was their job with the theme songs to establish the tone, place, and time of the episodes in lieu of title cards providing such information. The couple also sang on many of the theme songs, something they normally do not do for the final versions of their songs, which Anderson Lopez attributed in part to the pandemic. They were joined by a group of backup singers. Beck chose to align the style and instrumentation of some of the episode's music to the theme songs of those episodes, and tried to include motifs from the songs in the background score wherever possible. His music was recorded with a 75-player orchestra in Vienna, and he completed work on the series in February 2021. Soundtrack albums for each episode, including Beck's score and the theme songs by Lopez and Anderson Lopez, were released digitally by Marvel Music and Hollywood Records from January 22 to March 12, 2021, 1 week after each episode premiered. One of the theme songs, Agatha All Along, went viral after appearing in Breaking the Fourth Wall, peaking at #1 on iTunes soundtrack chart and reaching 5th on iTunes Top 100 Singles chart. It also debuted on Billboard's digital song sales chart at number 36. Marketing. Disney's marketing team conceived its campaign for the series roughly a year and a half before its release. At the 2019 D23, Olsen confirmed that the series would mix elements of classic sitcoms with the MCU, which was shown in a teaser for the series that combined footage of Maximoff and Vision from previous MCU films with images from old sitcoms The Dick Van Dyke Show and Father Knows Best. The series was promoted as part of Expanding the Universe, a Marvel Studios special that debuted on Disney Plus on November 12, 2019. In December, Feige debuted the first image from the series at Comic-Con Experience. Vinnie Mancuso of Collider said it was very interesting, highlighting the old-school black and white coloring. A commercial for the series and fellow Marvel Studios Disney Plus series, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Loki, was shown during Super Bowl LIV. In Versus Deus, Johnston found visual references to past sitcoms in the commercial, including The Dick Van Dyke Show, Leave It to Beaver, Bewitched, The Brady Bunch, Roseanne, and Full House. They thought the series would be a must-see for Marvel fans as well as anyone looking for a hit of nostalgia. Julia Alexander of The Verge said the footage wasn't much but offered enough glimpses to tease fans. Haley Fouch at Collider felt, of all the Super Bowl commercials, Marvel's stole the whole show. She was most excited by the utterly strange and unpredictable-looking WandaVision footage. The series' official trailer was released on September 20, 2020, during the 72nd Primetime Emmy Awards. The trailer received 55.7 million online views within 24 hours, including 36.1 million on YouTube, 4.9 million on Facebook, and 10.1 million on Instagram, which was believed to be the highest number ever for a streaming television series trailer. WandaVision also had over 302,600 social mentions, trending on Twitter immediately after a teaser aired during the Emmy Awards ahead of the full trailer's release, and ultimately trending fourth on Twitter. The trailer was the #2 trending video on YouTube. Ethan Anderton from Slash Films said the footage in the trailer looked like one of the most trippy Marvel projects to date. He also noted more lighthearted aspects of the trailer, such as Vision wearing a Halloween costume of the character's comic book design. Matt Patches at Polygon called the trailer a hoot, full of bright colors and odd behavior, adding that it still left much of the series a mystery. Comic book resources. Noah Domings said the trailer offers quite a bit in terms of content, with a vivid look at some of the visual tricks on display. Charles Pulliamore of IO9 called the trailer's use of Twilight Time by the Platters the most haunting of all of its strange features, and felt the trailer's editing created the effect of rapidly flipping through television channels in search of something good to watch. The Hollywood Reporter's Richard Newby described the trailer as jam-packed with information and felt that it gives fans quite a lot to look forward to, as well as some mysteries to ponder over leading up to the premiere. After actors from past Spider-Man films were revealed to be appearing in Spider-Man No Way Home, Graham McMillan of The Hollywood Reporter saw the series' official trailer in a new light, suggesting the different versions of Maximoff and Vision that appear in the series were because of Maximoff breaking down walls between different realities, which could set up Doctor Strange in the multiverse. In early December, 6 posters for the series were released daily, each depicting a decade from the 1950s through the 2000s. Pulliamore noted that with each new poster, different elements shift and morph, both reflecting the passage of time and WandaVision's plot developments. The release of the posters was followed by a new trailer that debuted at Disney's Investors' Day presentation. Anderton noted for Slash Film that the trailer featured more non-sitcom-inspired footage than previously seen, with a lot to soak in. Shane Gartenberg at The Verge called the new trailer mind-bending, while Tom Riemann of Collider described it as delightfully weird and drew comparisons to the House of M comic book storyline. Tony Sokol at Den of Geek highlighted the trailer's use of the Monkees' song Daydream, Believer, believing the title and lyrics reflected Maximoff's state well, though he noted that the music becomes barely recognizable under increasing layers of psychedelic weirdness. The trailer received 9 million views on YouTube. The first 2 episodes of the series Marvel Studios' Legends, released on January 8, 2021, explore Maximoff and Vision using footage from their MCU film appearances. Including the aforementioned trailers, the series' marketing campaign across outdoor, digital, television, and magazine advertisements yielded 2.14 billion impressions. Analytics firm Relish Mix determined the social reach for the series within its social media universe was 263,000, which was light years ahead of most streaming shows. The various trailers, ads, and interviews posted to YouTube garnered the most awareness and engagement for WandaVision, with Relish Mix noting that content posted to Marvel, Disney, and Disney Plus's official channels was then reposted on fan channels. Leading up to the series premiere, advertisements, special look stunt interstitials, co-branded takeovers, on-air graphic integrations, in-show integrations, and custom talent content appeared on the various channels and assets of Walt Disney Television, ESPN, and Hulu, while billboards were seen in major cities such as New York and Los Angeles. Talent and influencers were sent a TV dinner box that had a custom TV tray, utensil set, coasters, drinking glasses, and a custom journal designed to look like a vintage TV guide. A never-before-done reality-bending grid that updates on its own was created for the series' Instagram account, with Disney's marketing team uploading each post in a specific order while the account was private and then archiving them. Once the account became public, the different posts were unarchived and re-archived to show a different grid of images for each episode. Custom emojis on Twitter updated each week as WandaVision progressed through the decades. In January 2021, Marvel announced their Marvel Must-Haves program, which revealed new toys, games, books, apparel, home decor, and other merchandise related to each episode of WandaVision each Monday from January 18 to March 8, 2021. Additional must-haves merchandise was revealed on May 10, 2021. From late February 2021 until the series concluded in early March, Marvel partnered with chef Justin Warner to release recipes for food featured in or inspired by each episode. In June 2021, Hyundai Motor Company released a commercial featuring Olsen as Maximoff promoting WandaVision and the Hyundai Tucson. The commercial was produced by Marvel alongside similar commercials for The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki, and What If? And was meant to tell an in-world story set within the narrative of the series. Release: WandaVision premiered on Disney Plus on January 15, 2021, with the release of its first 2 episodes. The other 7 episodes released weekly until March 5. Marvel Studios originally planned to release the first 3 episodes simultaneously, but decided against it when it was realized the final episode would not be completed in time to stick to a weekly schedule. Marvel Studios also considered releasing the entire season at once but chose weekly releases after seeing the fun of week-to-week provided by the Disney Plus Star Wars series, The Mandalorian. Feige said the episodes were built with the weekly release in mind, so the audience could try to guess what happens next, to have a week speculating or rewatching and building that anticipation. He felt binge-watching the series after all the episodes were released would be an equally fun experience. The first 2 episodes were initially listed as Episode 1 and Episode 2 on Disney+, with their actual titles being revealed a few days after their release. Howie Tran-Buet/Film originally assumed all the episodes would be untitled, and wondered if the titles were being withheld upon release to avoid spoilers despite not finding the first two titles to be particularly revealing. Shakman said the series was able to premiere so soon after filming completed due to post-production work beginning during the series' COVID-19 production shutdown. Schaeffer felt the series was suited to being released during this moment in time amidst the pandemic because it is a reflection of a lot of the anxiety that we are feeling and a lot of the pathos and chaos of 2020, so it feels very right to me. Esquire's Matt Miller felt WandaVision had incredible timing with its release since much of the audience was collectively escaping to nostalgia to cope with a pandemic and the general chaos of the real world, similarly to what Maximoff was doing within the Westview reality, and said the series was commenting on the very nature and purpose of consuming comic book entertainment. The series was originally announced as releasing in early 2021, before being moved forward to a December 2020 release in February 2020. It was then moved back to the early 2021 slot in November 2020. It is the first series in and the start of Phase 4 of the MCU. Reception. Audience viewership. Nielsen Media Research, who measure the number of minutes watched by United States audiences on television sets, listed WandaVision as the sixth most watched original series across streaming services for the week of January 11-17, 2021, with 434 million minutes viewed. This is around 6.48 million complete views of the series' first two episodes, which is more complete views than the series on Nielsen's Top 10 Original Series list, which had more minutes viewed but longer runtimes available. WandaVision had been Disney Plus's most-watched series premiere on its opening weekend, ahead of the second season of The Mandalorian, until Disney Plus announced it was surpassed by the series premiere of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier in March 2021. According to analytics provider T-Vision, WandaVision was the most viewed title of January 2021 across measured platforms. The series had an 8,127 indexed audience size, which was 81 times more views than the average series measured by the service. T-Vision determines viewing impressions by counting its 14,000 viewers on connected televisions who have watched one of nearly 25,000 titles for at least 2 minutes within a session of watching content for Atla. Critical response. The review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes reported a 91% approval rating with an average rating of 7.83/10, based on 187 reviews. The site's critical consensus reads, part loving homage to TV history, part off-kilter mystery, WandaVision is a wonderfully weird and strikingly bold step into the small screen for the MCU and a perfect showcase for Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany. Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, assigned a score of 77 out of 100 based on 40 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. TV Line's Rebecca Inexai gave the first 3 episodes an A, calling them an intriguing, fresh, genuinely delightful deviation from what we've come to expect, and praising the performances of the cast, specifically Olsen. She did question if the series would have been better suited releasing its episodes all at once as opposed to weekly. Giving the series an A, Sam Barsanti at the AV Club called WandaVision the ultimate expression of the MCU potential to tell new kinds of stories and a series with the potential to be a riveting part of the MCU. Calling WandaVision Marvel's oddest series to date, Daniel Feinberg of The Hollywood Reporter said it was not weirder than Guardians of the Galaxy, but was creatively courageous to give a postmodern exploration of sitcom conventions to an audience expecting snazzy suits and explode. Feinberg likened the series to meta-sitcoms Get a Life, and That's My Bush, rather than a traditional comic book series, and called it Marvel's version of Too Many Cooks. The shift between each decade in the episodes was simply remarkable to Liz Shannon Miller of Collider. Miller praised Olsen and Bettany and said Hahn was too good for mere words to encompass. Awarding the series an A, Miller concluded that the MCU had not featured this level of experimentation before, and the series was actually daring to really challenge the viewer. Caroline Frank, in her review for Variety, called WandaVision an admirably weird introduction to the new age of Marvel TV, but felt it could be confusing to casual MCU viewers as well as fans of the sitcoms that inspired it. Frank also did not find any of the episodes particularly funny, and felt the series' best moments were when Maximoff and Vision were shown to not belong in their reality. Roxana Haddadi at Roger Ebert said it was difficult to tell where the series would go from the first 3 episodes, but she felt Maximoff and Vision were being sidelined in favor of the allusions to past sitcoms, and also that there was no sense of narrative stakes due to the series taking place within the larger narrative of the MCU. Dominic Patton of Deadline Hollywood was also critical of the series, calling it tiresome and a baby boomer punchline in search of a joke. Patton believed WandaVision was a step backward for Marvel television series, believing that Marvel's Netflix series and ABC Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. were better, and he added the series to his list of times Marvel had gotten it wrong. Discussing the entire series, Rolling Stone's Alan Sepinwall said WandaVision was terrific and clever in how it used narrative form to serve emotional function, despite feeling the final episode was underwhelming, and a tremendous start to Marvel Studios' television series. Chancellor Agard at Entertainment Weekly gave the series a B+, enjoying it because many of the speculated elements did not materialize in the series. Instead, WandaVision explored grief while also making Maximoff a fully fleshed-out character. Agard also enjoyed the various sitcom homages and the theme songs composed by Anderson Lopez and Lopez in the first 8 episodes, which in his view helped outweigh the content of the final episode. Michael Phillips, writing for the Chicago Tribune, was critical of the first 3 episodes, calling them interestingly bad and criticizing the use of sitcom tropes such as canned and deadly laugh tracks. He also felt that 1 episode's worth of story was stretched out over the first 3. Phillips was not as keen on the final 2 episodes, though episodes 4 through 7 were better received by him given the sitcom elements were better fits for Olsen and Bettany. He added the appearances of Dennings and Park in these episodes helped lighten the load, though the storytelling ultimately became a pretty stimulating blend of fan service and gentle, often moving subversion. Giving the series an 8 out of 10, Matt Purslow from IGN said, "The MCU first true venture into television constantly morphs between surreal sitcom, puzzle box mystery, and superhero dramatics, indicating that Marvel's confidence in a post-Endgame world remains strong. Free to write its own rules, WandaVision goes to places." Purslow enjoyed the performances from the cast, mainly Olsen, Bettany, and Hahn, and added the lack of consistency between each episode made each feel like a genuinely new adventure, believing nothing else in mainstream television could compare, and was a demonstration of Marvel Studios' absolute confidence in both the production talent and the audience. Analysis. After the first 3 episodes, The Hollywood Reporter's Richard Newby pointed out that hexagons were a recurring motif in the series, with hex meaning both 6 in Greek and witchcraft in German, and how both of those terms were prevalent in the early episodes. Julia Alexander, writing for The Verge, also took notice of the hexagons recurring throughout, agreeing with Newby's assessment. Speaking to the pacing and content of the first 3 episodes, William Hughes of the AV Club said while the premise of the series, Marvel's take on a mystery box show, was fantastic, it also sits in direct opposition to the MCU ethos, which can tolerate a mystery for exactly as long as it takes its antiest audience member to start to squirm. One of the more distracting elements, according to Hughes, was the shift in these episodes from the multi-camera sitcom to close-up single-camera shots, indicating a break in Maximoff's reality, and the series' lack of subtlety to its teases, which often distract from the legitimately wonderful work its leads are doing in their homage to classic comedy styles. Miles Surrey, writing for The Ringer, disagreed with Hughes, thinking the series understood the expectations of the audience, by not stretching out the mystery elements that much of the audience was probably deducing as seen with the fourth episode. Suri added that WandaVision isn't really trying to hide what it's about, but that works to the show's advantage. The series is getting better and way creepier the more it draws the curtain. Pulliam Moore was particularly fascinated by Vision becoming a father, given he toils at a job he doesn't understand, checks when things go bump in the night, and does his best to take care of chores around the house before Maximoff can get to them with her magic, all to ensure Maximoff stays happy in their charade. He also felt the series was being purposeful with its exploration of romance and intimacy, which he felt was largely missing from superhero films. Trauma therapist Erin Qualley felt WandaVision was a positive representation of complex mental health issues in media, stating the exploration of Maximoff's grief in the series made her quickly become one of the most relatable characters on television in the COVID-19 era, in which many were living with similar traumas. Qualley added, by exploring how the process of admitting weakness can become an inherent strength. Speaking to a moment in the 8th episode when Vision likens grief to love persevering, Qualley said it was fantastic that Marvel took an earnest pause to convey this sentiment. The series' use of red herrings and elements that led to theories, many of which proved incorrect, was also widely discussed. The casting of Peters as Pietro Maximoff was one in particular, with Carlos Morales of IGN feeling using Peters in the role was a hollow move because it simultaneously dilutes what should be an important character beat into an "I know him." Schaeffer said Peters ultimately portraying Ralph Bohner was not meant to feel like a prank, and described how the casting fit into the series' larger exploration of Maximoff's grief, adding using another actor besides Peters was not going to have the same thrill and craziness and questions, and be as disorienting. Screen Rant's Daniel Gillespie agreed, called the casting an incredibly smart move, as it threw audiences off the scent and helped spark theories and discussion for the series and MCU that might not have happened if another actor had been cast. Adam B. Very from Variety felt Peters' appearing turned out to be a play on the sitcom trope of character recastings was a really good joke, but conceded for it to fully work, the viewer needed to know that Peters had previously portrayed Peter Maximoff in the X-Men films. This is where Very felt the series got itself into some trouble since all kinds of multiverse shenanigans seemed to be at play, and the serious and seriously online fandom took that and sprinted with it. Speculation also arose from using Peters that additional members of the X-Men would appear or other actors who previously played characters from the X-Men film series. The character Dottie was another red herring in the series, with additional ones added into the sets and through visual effects. Fans and commentators also speculated about an aerospace engineer mentioned by Rambo potentially being Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four, Benedict Cumberbatch appearing as Stephen Strange, which was later revealed to have been in the works, and if the Marvel Comics villain Mephisto would appear, indicating him as the overarching villain of Phase 4. Schaeffer felt the series never presented the expectations that any of these speculations would be part of the series, but believed it delivered on the expectations and promises it did make. Collider's Carly Lane agreed with this sentiment, believing the series never strayed from the story it set out to tell, adding WandaVision's weekly release allowed viewers to create expectation over what they hoped the show would satisfy rather than focusing on what it actually gave us. Lane concluded that there was nothing inherently wrong with fan theories, but equating a rewarding experience to how many theories come true overlooks all of the places where the story has already succeeded. Accolades. WandaVision is one of 117 television series that received the Reframe stamp for the years 2020 to 2021. The stamp is awarded by the Gender Equity Coalition Reframe as a mark of distinction for projects that hire female-identifying people in 4 out of 8 critical areas of production to show progress in gender-balanced television production. Documentary special. In February 2021, the documentary series Marvel Studios Assembled was announced. The series' first special, Assembled, The Making of WandaVision explores the making of the series, with Schaeffer, Shakman, Olsen, Bettany, Rupp, Hahn, Parris, Park, Dennings, Peters, and others discussing the classic sitcoms that inspired the series, how the crew emulated the production processes of early sitcoms, and the experience. The special was released on Disney Plus on March 12, 2021. Future. In January 2021, Schaeffer said she was unable to talk about any potential plans for a second season, but said the series would feel very complete. Shakman said there were no plans at all for a second season, and one would only be made if a specific story came about that would warrant it. Feige did not rule out a second season being made, but said one was not planned and pointed to Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness instead as the continuation of the story set up in WandaVision, with the story also continuing in other places. Parris will star as Rambo in the film The Marvels 2022, the sequel to Captain Marvel, which is being written by. In June 2021, Olsen referred to WandaVision as a limited series.